This is the Rachel Show, and today we are going to interview a very young attendee from AmericaFest, which just wrapped up today, Turning Point's annual convention. This is Ocean Rasso, and he is 15 years old, and he looks like he is already on his way to being one of our next youth leaders. I heard him a couple of weeks ago at an event speaking, and he already sounds better than most of the older generations at this point. So, Ocean, first question I'm dying to ask you is, how did you get your name Ocean?
Well, that's actually my parents decided to name me Ocean. They used to watch a old TV show. One of the characters was named Ocean, and they decided, if we ever have a child, we're going to name him Ocean. And fast forward about 10, 15 years, and then I came along.
That's so cool. Yeah, I have an ex-boyfriend whose sister was named after a TV show character, just like that. Why did you decide to get involved in politics? And like, are your parents conservative? Were they involved? How that all come about?
Yes, well, my parents have always been very conservative, always had strong, true principles and values, but they weren't really super politically involved. I first got started in the political world when I was 10 years old. This was all the way back in 2020. I was sitting on my couch and I had this little book that I had opened up, and you would write in. They had a map of all the states, and I just write in with a crayon the different states, the colors as they would be announced. So as before I go to bed, it's all red, red, red. Well, all of a sudden, I wake up the next morning and I have to do a bunch of erasing because everything had flipped to be magically blue. And it
Wow.
was at that moment that I knew I had to stand up for the conservative movement. I had to stand up for justice and what is right and what is true.
Because you knew that the election had basically been cheated, right?
Yes, it's crazy that me being 10 years old knew that an election, it was obviously something was wrong. Yet you have all of these people in the mainstream media telling you the complete opposite, a completely different narrative. So it just goes to show that the truth is so apparent, and they really will do anything to cover it up.
Oh yeah, it's still going, but eventually we're going to get to the bottom of it because there are so many people still looking into the fraud in that election that it is far from over. And as the Bible says, your sins will find you out, and so eventually these
Yes,
criminals are going to get caught. So,
exactly.
what's your involvement in Turning Point? Like, do you have a Turning Point chapter at your high school, or how's all that?
Yeah, so I'm a proud Turning Point chapter president from North Peoria. We do what's called an activism hub, so it's specifically tailored to homeschoolers, although we're trying to open the doors for anybody to join. But we specifically go into, as a Turning Point chapter, the Constitution, what true freedom is. And it is really amazing to see these young kids who are about my age and some younger, who are opening the Constitution perhaps for the first time, who are just glossing over the Declaration of Independence. In fact, we have one young student who I want to point out. She has been reading the Constitution quite a bit, and it is really incredible to see how they're really comprehending what true freedom is, how important the Constitution is. And now they want to go out and, enlighten others as to the importance of the Constitution. So this movement really is never going to stop because the Constitution is the basis of our nation. And if we come to understand that, then we see everything through a different lens, through the lens of the founding fathers.
And one thing I found really fascinating about you in the speech I heard is, a lot of people will talk about wokeness, they'll talk about transgenders, they'll talk about lawfare, but you're going back to the Constitution and our founding fathers. And that is just, you don't hear that from your generation. I mean, it's amazing how you've been able to pick that up and get others talking about it. And I don't know how you get more people to do it other than, okay, you've got your own show. Maybe, that'll do it. And I assume we're going to talk about your book at the end of this, but I assume your book is going to reinforce that as well.
Yes, definitely. I hope it does. But just getting involved, you can kind of see how if we just go back to the ideas and principles of the Constitution, which is based off of natural and moral law, that is the guiding point for our nation. The founders didn't just create something out of thin air. They had something that was tried and true and tested because they lived at such an incredible time where they were able to look back upon the histories of Greece and Rome and see that a democracy did not work. So they created a constitutional republic. Yet they were able to look at the time they were in, see that a monarchy didn't work. A monarchy takes away your freedom of speech, religion, press, assembly. And so they were able to craft the first 10 amendments to the Constitution, the Bill of Rights. Yet they were also able to look toward the future and codify the idea of amendments in the Constitution to make sure that future generations could have a voice and an input into the way that our nation is run.
And I like how you pointed out that the founders realized that a democracy wouldn't work. I always laugh whenever the Democrats say that we have a democracy, because if we did have a straight democracy, every person in the country would be voting on every issue that Congress decides. It's not
Yes.
possible. Back in Socrates' day, yes, it was, because there was just a small group of people that would come together and they would vote in the town square. But for the huge United States, you can't physically do it.
Yeah, I like the way one of the founders described a democracy. He said it's like two wolves and a sheep voting on what is for lunch. It will become mob rule. And if when we hear these politicians and these activists go up and say, we got to protect and preserve our democracy, or God forbid you're a traitor or a threat to democracy. Well, I always like to say, how can I be a traitor to something that we aren't? We're not a democracy. We're a constitutional republic. And we need to get back to that idea if we are to save this nation. Because if we don't even know what government we are, if we don't know how our nation is run, well, then obviously we're going to start believing that men can be women and we should judge based on race and not merit, and that children can make whatever decisions they want. We have to hold on to moral law, which is God's law. The founders didn't just make this up out of thin air. This comes from Judeo-Christian principles, and we need to harken back to those principles if we are going to save our nation.
That's right. And, I can just hear Kamala Harris saying, we're a democracy over and over again. And all I can think of is, this woman wanted to be the most powerful person in the world, and she didn't even know that we're not a democracy. Oh my gosh. Yeah, maybe her generation is too late to save, but yours isn't.
Well, to be fair to Kamala Harris, and I've ever thought I'd be saying that, many of our politicians on both the right side of the aisle and the left side of the aisle think we're a democracy. This is a both-party issue. This transcends political boundaries. You walk up to a majority of my generation, regardless of political affiliation, and they will tell you that we're a democracy. They do not know that we are a constitutional republic. So I can give Kamala a little bit of grace, even though she was the sitting vice president. That should be very apparent. And I would hope she'd be reading the Constitution, for being in as powerful position as she was and hoping to be in one of those powerful positions in the world. But I do have hope for Gen Z and Gen A, because I think that if we continue the movement of Charlie Kirk, we're going to continue the movement back to the Constitution to really understand the guidelines and the morals and the values that shaped our nation.
You're like right in the middle of Gen Z and Gen A, or which one are you?
Yeah, I'm like right in between. So I can really identify with the way Gen Z has been raised, with the immersion of social media and that new technology. But I can also kind of relate to Gen A and how they really grew up during that COVID era. So I kind of get, you can almost say the worst of both generations. But it really is an interesting aspect to have, to be able to see, how to present these issues of the Constitution and freedom to them. Because we need to use the means that we're given. We need to work within what we have. So you need to start getting on social media and promoting the ideas of freedom. You need to start reaching out to the next generation, because if we don't now, then all hope is lost, because it's through them that we are saved.
So I gotta ask you, I was looking at your X feed and you have so many photos with key figures. I just want to know your secret. How did you get all those photos?
So, I love Charlie Kirk stories. And one of the greatest ones is when he would just go to different places and run around and try to meet as many people as possible. He would just walk up to people who were conducting interviews and ask, hey, could I be interviewed? And that's kind of become my guiding philosophy, is just to be like Charlie. He didn't care, he had nothing to lose. He was just shortly before his passing, he was on a podcast, the Iced Coffee Hour. And I listened to the full thing, and it was a great podcast. And he said, they asked him a question about whether he was nervous when he went up to one of these multi-millionaire billionaires and I was asking for money. And he said, well, I have nothing to lose. I mean, sure, I could get embarrassed, but that's gonna last for what, 5 seconds? If they say no, that's the worst answer that could possibly be. It's a no. So my philosophy is just go out there, try to make as many connections as possible. And what's so great about AmericaFest is these influencers, they want to meet you. So I've had the great opportunity to talk with many great influential people in the conservative realm. I got to talk to Ben Carson and Michael Knowles and just many different array of conservative speakers and thinkers, and it really just is incredible. I don't think there's really anything like AmFest in the conservative movement. It really is one of a kind.
Yeah, I mean, CPAC's a little bit like it, but he just doesn't have all the youth and the young people. It's a different vibe, and yeah,
Yes.
I mean, I like them both, and I feel like there's a place for both. But I feel like AmFest is a product of an organization that is trying to do a specific goal. Unlike CPAC, which is a little just more broad. Here's the conservative movement. AmFest is all about we are getting out the vote. We're going to change elections and recruit the youth.
Yeah. And that's the whole point is you gotta get to the youth because what we're seeing right now is a mass exodus of the older generations from the voting age, from the voting demographics. And now we're starting to see these younger people who are getting pushed to be voters. I'll be able to vote in 2028. And that is really a problem if we're not educating them and actively engaging them. Because, we have I've seen some polls estimate between 20 and 30% of our nation votes in elections. Abysmal numbers. We need to start getting those numbers up because it's not it shouldn't be just pointing at other people and saying you need to vote. You should be pointing at yourself and saying what can I do to get out the vote because that's what matters. That's what makes an impact.
So, what were some of your impressions of AmFest, and was this the first year you attended?
No, so I was very lucky and blessed to attend last year's AmFest and get to see Charlie in action, meet him a couple of times, watch him as he did conducted interviews on Media Row and see a lot of his speeches. But this year felt really different. I think, I was honored to be able to attend the memorial for Charlie. And so a lot of people were kind of guessing that would be the same atmosphere and vibe as the memorial, kind of a mourning time. And there was some of that, but it was also a time for hope because this was the largest attended AmFest we've ever had. Last year we had about 20,000 attendees. This year we had between 33 and 40,000 attendees. And we got there today for the last day of AmFest on Sunday. And we got there around 4 o'clock just to see what the crowd was like. And it was incredible. The line was wrapped around the building. There were so many people. They were all excited to get in. You had young children who were ready to go and, get to meet the celebrities and people they looked up to. And then you had the older folks who just wanted to see the power of the youth. It really was incredible. This really is a way for everybody to unite, everybody to come together. And there really just isn't anything like this, where you have the old and the young and, black and white, rich or poor. We don't really care. We open up our movement to everyone.
And did you have any favorite moments of AmFest that you were just like, this is the best thing?
Yeah, well, I was incredibly honored to be featured on the Michael Knowles show. I've looked up to Michael for a very long time. I've gotten to read a lot of his books and see a lot of his content. So that was really an incredible moment. And then, of course, just interacting with a lot of different people from different backgrounds. I don't know if you've seen the clip from Target of the employee that got harassed because of her Charlie Kirk shirt. I actually got to meet her. America's Grandma is her new nickname. And she's just so incredible. Janine is just an incredible lady. And I got to talk to her for a few minutes and record some content with her. And she really does inspire hope in the next generation. She really earned the title America's Grandma. That would probably have to be my favorite moment from AmFest.
And what was so great about that clip was the woman harassing her, taking a video of her, kept saying, like, you're racist, you're supporting racist. And like this humble older lady, you can tell she is the last person alive who would be a racist. It just.
Yes, well, then I think that everybody should see the moment when she walked out with Benny Johnson. It was incredible. The crowd was electric. Everybody was excited to see her. And then she came out today with Glenn Beck, and that was just incredible. I mean, Glenn Beck was in tears over the fact he shared the news that she had previously lost her husband. So she related to Erica. And that's just a really precious moment. I saw the clip circulating on X of Erica meeting with her backstage. This is really just an incredible moment, an incredible time where we have people who are standing up for what is right. People like Janine who are ready to get into action, who are fighting for their values and what they believe, and are not letting other people bring them down. And I got to talk to her and ask her, what is your message to the youth of America? And she told me, just be kind. Be kind to one another, be civil. Don't, if someone is mean to you, just walk away. That was her message.
I've been to all the previous AmFests, every day covering them, and I have to say this was definitely the most beautiful AmFest yet. For reasons.
Oh, yes, by far. This was an incredibly different experience.
Now, one thing that intrigued me about watching all of AmFest was all of the controversy, the infighting going on where you had speaker attacking speaker. It was pretty bad the first 2 days. What did you think of this? Is this something that can be easily fixed? And did you see any of this happening elsewhere at AmFest?
Well, before I get to that topic, I want to share a little bit about what the crowd thought of this issue. I was walking the exhibition hall, and because I was bouncing back between different interviews, and I got the opportunity to stop and watch a debate that was going on. There was this booth that was set up, and it had hand-drawn posters and everything, and it was a prove me wrong. And now the questions were quite interesting. They ranged from Nick Fuentes to Candace Owens to the death of Charlie Kirk. And just being able to watch the way that the youth debated, it was quite civilly. I was actually very impressed. After a while, it did get a little rowdy because there were about 50 to 100 people standing around watching, and they were all feeding off the energy of the vigorous debate. And then the microphones went out, and it really got disastrous. But just watching that, they conducted a very good debate initially before there was this large crowd. So I do think there is hope that we can reconcile our differences. But when it comes to those sharing the stage, I think there's an issue that we need to address. And it's if we agree on 90% of the issues, why are we fighting? I've been asked the question at multiple interviews at AmFest, what do you think of all the infighting in the conservative movement? And my response has always been, I think it proves how much we needed Charlie. Because for all we saw of Charlie going to college campuses, for all we saw of him writing his books and being on the show and talking to young people and debating, we didn't really see the inside view of what he did. He was the glue of the Republican Party. He was the coalition builder. He cobbled together this coalition. Charlie Kirk events were the only place where you could get Tucker Carlson and Ben Shapiro on the same stage. It really is just something incredible about Turning Point USA. But without Charlie, that whole thing kind of fell apart. And now we have this fracture in the conservative movement. And Michael Knowles pointed out in one of the first AmFest speeches on day one, how on the conservative side, we have all different branches of the conservative movement. The paleo conservatives and the neocons and the right-wingers and the libertarians and all these different groups. Whereas the left has liberal, more liberal, and John Fetterman. And we need to get, there's one thing we can learn from the Democrat Party. It's that they are always united. They do a good job of being unified. And that is something we need to imitate if we hope to win the midterms, which we desperately need to. Because as J.D. Vance pointed out in his AmFest speech today, if we don't, then we will get a 2-year presidency with Donald Trump. Because, the moment that Democrats get power, they will try to impeach him. They will try to impeach all of his appointees. And America will rapidly decline back into the state it was during the Biden administration. And we cannot lose the 2028 election because, God forbid, we get Kamala Harris again, who I think is considering running. If she gets back in government, I don't know what's going to happen. I mean, it would be insane.
And I'll just add, as a journalist, I feel like there's an analogy there. How you said we're beating each up over the 10% of things we disagree on when we agree on 90%. Well, in journalism, only 3% of journalists are Republicans. So I think, why are we criticizing other Republicans in our articles when the left is already 97% of the news articles out there are already doing it? It doesn't even make sense. Like, I don't even like quoting the left in my articles and trying to look fair because the left already has so many articles out quoting them. But anyway, that's just a side pet peeve of mine. And a lot of conservative organizations still tell us journalists you got to show both sides in news articles. So anyway,
Well, it just this whole problem really makes me sad because I really looked up to a lot of these people that are involved in this debate. Some of them I really think highly of, but we can't just continue to, have this friendly fire on the right side of the aisle. I know Matt Walsh addressed this issue a couple of days before AmFest. We need to just put aside the differences. We really do. That we cannot continue down this path. We can't have a huge divide in the conservative movement. Sure, we can debate the small differences that don't matter. Sure, we can debate the insignificant issues. But when it comes to the main stuff, we need to stand united because we need everyone we can get. Because without Charlie, we have lost the main voice in the movement. And now there's this power vacuum and everybody's trying to fill it. And that's not going to happen because Charlie did everybody's job all at once. So we need to stay strong, united, together, or else we will fall. We will lose this nation like that if we don't do something now.
let's just all be praying for Erica Kirk to do what Charlie did and unite everyone. So,
Amen. I have high hopes for Erica. I think that she's doing a great job already.
Okay, here's a question I really have. So, how can we get more youth involved on X and maybe even Facebook, or is that just too dead for them?
I don't really know. I think the youth try to be involved in social media. But we've been so inundated in our society with short form content, and now with the rise of AI, we're getting this AI slop that is being put out, and so it really is tiring for a lot of youth, a lot of the young people who have already been inundated with meme culture and all of this. It really has no meaning anymore. I saw a great documentary put out by the journalist Johnny Harris, who I don't agree with 100% on the issues, but he did put out a very good video recently about why everything seems so boring now. We've just become addicted to social media. But I do think that X offers a different alternative where we're actually hearing voices for a change. And, we're starting to have a more free speech platform. That's why we see the rise of Rumble as a video viewing platform above YouTube. And I think that is important that we have more free speech oriented social media platforms. But the issue really does come down to whether Gen Z is already tired of social media. I mean, we've just been inundated our whole lives. We're told that we need to be on it constantly, that it's the only way to get famous is to have 100,000 followers on Instagram. But that's not what real success is. So we need to measure our success by how much of an impact you make in the world, not how many clicks or views you have. Because what really makes an impact is going out and getting out the vote and going and convincing your neighbors, your family, your friends about how important our constitutional republic is. But I do think it is important that we bring Gen Z into the discussion. And if we're going to do that, we need to start roping them into these important conversations on X or Facebook. So we just need to kind of empower them. And I know that's a word that the left uses a lot, and a lot of conservatives, don't like to use the word empower, but we really do. Because since the beginning of Generation Z and Generation A, they've been told that politics is not something they should be worried about, and that it's for adults, and that they need to focus on their careers or social media or school. But that's not all true. I like to say just because I can't vote doesn't mean I can't make an impact on the vote. And if I don't stand up and fight for freedom now, I might not be able to fight for it in the future. Freedom might not be there in the future if we don't stand up for it now. So it's important that we allow the next generation to take the torch, to start preserving freedom, because they want to do it. Trust me, they want to do it. They just haven't been told that they can. And we need to really work on that.
So kind of related to that, I give speeches to a lot of Republican clubs, and they're pretty much almost all old people. And so, how can we get the message out to the young people and get them more involved and you know the other than like the turning point chapters that they're starting at high schools and colleges? Do you have any ideas? How do we reach them?
Well, I can sympathize with what you're saying. I've been all across the state, from Dewey to Apache Junction and everywhere in between. And that is correct. A lot of these Republican clubs, well, there are a lot of older people. And of course, I love that because I'm gaining wisdom every time I go out and speak. But there is a problem, is that there's not youth there to gain the wisdom of the older generations. So we need to start pulling them in using their tactics. It doesn't work to have bingo at a Republican club. We need to start actively engaging the youth with what things they want to do. They want to be involved with sports. They have a whole different world, and we need to start tailoring to that. We need to work within the means that we are given. So we need to get on their social media platforms. We need to get on Instagram. We need to get on YouTube, as I have. And we need to start, creating short form content for them to digest. I think that's something that Charlie did very well, was he was able to kind of feel the pulse of the next generation and kind of predict what they wanted to see, what they wanted to do. So we need to continue the movement. We need to get more Club America chapters. We need to get more Turning Point High School chapters and college chapters, because that is how we reach the youth. And we need to get more youth advocates like myself, because I can't do this alone. And, they're more inclined to listen to someone who's their age, who's actively warning them, than a politician up on stage at the RNC. So we need to start getting more youth advocates involved who are going to get out there and spread the message of liberty and freedom and the Constitution. I think that's how you get Gen Z. You need to go out there and you need to, present your argument, present your case, because they're apathetic. They don't care about freedom. They don't know what freedom means. So we need to get out there and we need to reinvigorate those who are apathetic.
And I'm just glad you're doing it because, like somebody told me the other day at my Bible study, I was like, well, why don't your kids ever attend? And they were like, oh, we're old people. They don't want to attend. And so, there's a lot of young people that they would rather listen to somebody like you and then listen to old people talking about it. So that's important. We've got about 10 minutes left. So let's jump into your new book, which is, what's the name of it here? You said it's coming out on January 8th. It's called Preserving Freedom.
Yes, Preserving Freedom for the Next Generation. I was going to bring on my paper copy that I have. I just have an early print, if you will. But I've been bringing it all around AmericaFest, and everybody has been taking a look at it. So it's basically falling apart. It's like scrap paper now. But this is the cover of the book, Preserving Freedom for the Next Generation. As you can see, it kind of ties in all the elements that we need to get involved with. You have the founding fathers and you have the hand passing the torch to the next generation. I'm very honored to have the book endorsed by many leaders of the conservative movement. Eric Metaxas, New York Times bestselling author. Larry Schweikert, another New York Times bestselling author. U.S. Congressman Andy Biggs. She Van Fleet, another bestselling author. Professor Owen Anderson. Many other many other figures in the conservative movement. It really is incredible. But the book goes into what freedom is, what our rights are, how important they are, and why they're under attack, why we have this kind of liberal versus conservative mentality in America, and how ultimately we can preserve freedom for the next generation by joining the movement, by educating the uneducated, enlightening the lost, and reinvigorating the apathetic to save this nation.
That is wonderful. I don't know anyone as young as you who's ever written a book, and I have never even written one myself. So I commend you for it, and I look forward to promoting it when it comes out. And my final question for you is, what are your future plans down the road? Are you planning to run for office someday, or what? Go to college, major in something? What are you going to do?
Well, I believe in what Charlie did, and that's that college is a scam. So I'd probably only go if I went to Hillsdale or some Christian conservative college where I actually learn what truth is and where I actually learn something. But I do take the Hillsdale online courses. I encourage every single one of you watching to do that, to do the same, even if you're young. Charlie, when he met Larry Arnn, who is the head of Hillsdale College, Larry, he kind of Charlie presented his case to Larry, and Larry kind of gave him a quiz on on what he was saying. So he's like, define freedom, define college, and Charlie couldn't define college. So Charlie made it a point to go and take all of the college courses for Hillsdale, and he would send all of the completion letters one by one. It's amazing. So I encourage all of you guys to go check out those courses. But you just need to go and get more knowledgeable. That's what I'm focusing on right now, is just trying to gain more knowledge, but also wisdom, because it's something that Charlie had. He didn't just have knowledge, he had true wisdom. He knew what the next generation wanted, and he gave it to them. But me personally, I initially would like to run for office, but now that I've been involved so much for the past 5 years, it really has become apparent how broken the system is and how much of a need there is for people on the outside really calling out the corruption going on in our system. So I'm going to continue doing what I'm doing. I'm going to continue going around the state of Arizona and the nation and rallying the next generation of freedom fighters. I'm going to get the book out so that we can preserve freedom for the next generation. I'm going to keep up my show, and we keep encouraging all those to join Club America chapters in your area, because we need to save and preserve the legacy of Charlie Kirk.
Well, thank you. And let's tell all of our viewers where they should go to follow you and your work.
Yeah, so you can find my show, The Ocean Rasso Show, on YouTube. And you can also find me on all social media platforms, X, Facebook, Instagram, Threads, at Ocean Rasso.
Thank you so much for coming on, Ocean, and I hope to see you, soon at another political event.
Thank you so much for having me.
Bye.